Our next presentation, looking across your plate, branding strategies. Before we get started though, before I introduce Joanne McArthur, just one quick correction. With respect to your name tags, if you are attending the dinner tonight, or if you are attending the event tomorrow, hang on to those name tags. If you are not, then please do leave them off at the registration desk. Thank you. So please join me in welcoming Joanne McArthur. Joanne McArthur is founding partner and president of the International Food Marketing Alliance and Nourish Food Marketing. Joanne has spent a career building brands with consumers and retailers at P&G, Unilever, Cadillac Fairview, and Molson as a divisional vice president. So at this point, please join me in welcoming Joanne.
Thank you, Paul. Okay. I'm going to get everybody seated and we're going to get going. So who is Nourish? Well, we are Canada's only full-service, one-stop shop for food and beverage marketing. So we do everything from market assessment through to packaging development. We work on some formulation in terms of consumer taste profile. We don't get involved in the real formulation. That work is best done here. And then we work with our brokers with go-to-market strategies at retail, getting you listed on shelf. And then we work on the consumer marketing strategies to make sure that you get off shelf into the shopper's basket and ultimately into that shopper's heart. So we work on marketing programs as well there. But first, when we talk about branding, what do we mean? And the first quote is from David Ogilvy, who is sort of the original madman of advertising. And he talked about branding being the intangible sum of a product's attributes. Or, as I like to say sometimes in the words of our food broker, Peter Murphy, he says, "You're not a brand if no one's heard of you." And very true words. So if you look at where we are in the year 2015, I'd argue that, basically competing on functional benefits, my detergent will make your clothes whiter than white, those days are largely over, right? We have reached a certain level of quality. It's kind of table stakes now. Even with technology a lot of times, functional benefits are less of a differentiator. And so to compete just on those rational functional benefits, you're not truly going to be a brand. To be a brand, you need consumers to be willing to pay more for you. They're not going to switch if somebody's a little bit cheaper. Ultimately, you want them to switch grocery stores if you're not available there. And the biggest test of branding is would that person actually recommend you to another consumer? And as consumers, as human beings, we're wired to connect emotionally, right? We connect to brands in an emotional way. So you really need to figure out what is your brand's emotional point of difference. And the rational always follows. But ultimately, the real test of a brand, I'm guessing that absolutely everybody in this room knows what brand that is on the left-hand side of that page, right? Yes? Coke, right? Yeah. It's not just a cola, that's Coke, and that's the test of a real brand. Now, what's the problem with this graph? It's pretty ugly. And what it shows is that even though Canada as a country exports more food than ever, we are at a deficit with respect to added value food, right? So we need, as a country, to start going beyond strictly exporting commodities. And you can add value in different ways, right? You can add value in terms of processing. You can also add value in terms of branding. So we really need to start, as Canadian producers, looking across our plates to other markets and think about how we can start adding value so we don't continue with that really ugly looking graph. I always kind of look in horror when I shop and I see, we export lentils to the rest of the world. But when I go into a store and I see lentils in other forms, quite often they've been imported back from another country that actually added that value and that brand. And it's been talked a lot about today. If there's a common theme I've heard here, it's that. When it's with respect to food, it's all about trust, right? Consumers want to know what's in the food they're eating. How was it made? Where did the ingredients come from? How were the animals treated? How were the people treated that were all involved in creating that product? And we're seeing this fast become a global truth. It started in North America, but we're now starting to see this bubble up in the Middle East, in India, and even in China now. And we, as Canada, we have what they want, right? We have those pristine waters. We have the natural advantages that we need to leverage. Because of our climate, we use fewer chemicals to treat our crops for diseases and pests. So that means we have lower residues. So we really need to start to leverage those natural advantages that we have as brand Canada. We know that being a product of Canada can be a little difficult, because to label something as product of Canada, that you have to have 98% of all your total direct costs of the good in Canada. However, made in Canada is much easier, right? There you can do something with only 51%. And we know that made is a powerful word. I always say made matters, whether it's made in, made by, or made since, right? You look at those chocolates from Belgium, right? Made matters there. You look at that beer from Germany, and it's been made since 1664. Made matters there. Consumers value authenticity, and they will gladly pay a premium when the brand's connections to origin run deep. And in fact, there's a lot of industry research that puts provenance before price and availability when shopping for food and drink. So made in, made by, made since, they all matter. And they're short form or a shorthand for things that consumers care about. Quality, ingredients, health, animal welfare, environmental and labor concerns. In short, provenance equals consumer confidence. So, what's best about you as a company, right? And how can you leverage that? What's best about you as a producer or a processor, and how can you leverage that? And in fact, we've seen some of that starting to pop up, right? Canadian chicken farmers capitalized on this. They saw research that said 85% of Canadians think it's important that their chicken is raised in Canada. So they launched this campaign last year to great effect. We've seen this with exports. When the word Canada and the maple leaf was added to cases of lobsters being exported to China, those exports tripled in the course of a year, right? And why is that? Because of our pristine waters. The Chinese do not trust things that are coming out of their own water anymore, but Canada is seen as a poster child. But as brand Canada, we frankly suck at talking about ourselves and getting that message out. You know, there's been a little bit of discussion already today, and I thought they were very wise words. You know, before you can start going over there and start exporting, products, you need to stand for something. We as Brand Canada need to stand for more than just maple syrup. So what is our cri de coeur, what is our rallying cry as a country? What do we stand for? You know, we've been feeding the world for 150 years, but we don't talk about it, we don't celebrate it. And we've got a chance to celebrate, right? In just over a year, in the year 2017, it's going to be Canada's 150th birthday. So I think there's a chance to get a renewed enthusiasm and support, not just within Canada, among Canadians who want to support and celebrate local products and producers, but also internationally. We should be celebrating this in export settings, and we should be showcasing the quality and variety of Canadian food to foreign markets. How many of you have heard about Origin Green, what Ireland has been doing around branding? A couple of you. So I'm going to show this in terms of inspiration because I think they're doing a really great job out there, and I think that certainly it's something that we could all learn from, whether we're from Canada or other countries, in terms of how you can start getting that rallying cry going. So bear with me while I key this up.
We did not inherit this world from our parents. We borrowed it from our children. One day, we will return it to them. When we do, it should be every bit as bountiful as it was when we found it. That's what sustainability means. And sustainability is what the world needs now, which gives Ireland a momentous opportunity, maybe the defining opportunity of our time, because the rewards it can bring us all are breathtaking. Ireland can become a world leader in sustainably produced food and drink. It's a bold ambition, but it can be realised, because sustainability has always been at the source of who we are. Think about it. Our climate has always been this mild. Our landscape this lush. Our fields have always been this green and windswept and rain-washed. Our seas have always teemed with fish. The elements have always conspired here to make great farming possible. And that's deep within us. Our farms have been looked after by generation after generation of families. Our fishing industry too. All caretakers, custodians, protectors. Because every generation has acknowledged one simple fact, that this land belongs not to us, but to the ones who come after. So, many of the things we need for sustainability are already in place. But there is much more to be done. To become known throughout the world for the food and drink we make in harmony with nature, we need to embark on a journey. It's a journey with sustainability as its destination. It's a journey we should make for this generation. It's a journey we must make for the next. We need to tell the world we're on that journey, and we need to show them proof that we can partake of the world without taking from the world. So come and join us. Sustainability is the destination. I can see it up ahead. It's within our reach because it always has been. It's our destiny because it was part of our past. Now let's all pull together, join this movement, share this vision, celebrate the extraordinary source that is this country, and bring the food and drink that we make with such care for the world to the world. Let's all sign up to Origin Green.
So that was the video that launched their Cri de Coeur in Ireland. And I think that was 4 years. Since that time, they have had 90% of food and beverage exporters from Ireland sign up, and they are hoping that they will get to 100% next year. So can it be done? It can be, and we need to do it, I believe. I want to switch gears for a minute and talk a little bit about another related shift that we're seeing in consumer behavior. And that is the shift with packaged food. And consumers are starting to actually question packaged food's reason for being, right? We're now seeing that consumers are shopping the perimeter, the perceived healthier part of the stores. And if you look at the perimeter of grocery stores, those departments are up 30% in the last 5 years. Meanwhile, the aisles in the middle of the store are down and are actually being referred to within the industry as the morgue. Shoppers no longer obediently go up and down each aisle, right? So there's a real attack against packaged food. And we know that simplicity sells, because simplicity equals clean equals healthy, right? But we don't often tend to think of brands when we think about the perimeter of the store, right? If you are a producer, are you really a brand, or are you just a commodity? Well, I challenge you to say that yes, you can be a brand. We've done this for other clients. I love even the Spud can be branded. It's about as humble a product as you get, right? But you see the sepia-toned photograph there of the field from where they were plucked in a bid to sell that potato's unique provenance, right? And its contents. It's authentic when you look at that. So the shopper isn't merely just buying a bag of potatoes, they're buying into that farm. They're buying the field and fingers that actually pulled those potatoes from the earth. So they're buying the story. They're buying your story. And that story is more important than ever. One of the first things we do when we meet a new person, we want to know where they're from and what their story is. And it's the same for brands, right? We want to know who's behind our food. But the barn door is closed, right? Too many big companies practice what I call faux craft. They slapped the picture of the barn door on their packaging as a way to try to buy authenticity. And in a world of, the Internet 2.0, you cannot hide behind faux craft anymore. You get called out. And so we saw consumers start to get really litigious, especially in the US a couple of years ago, around the use of the word natural, right? Cashy, pop chips. There's been a whole bunch of class action suits where big companies have lost. But they're still trying to wrap their product up in this guise of faux craft. But indeed, there's a flexion point right now. I think there is no better time to be a small producer or a small brand, because big brand is under attack. Certainly for boomers and for our parents, they equated big brands with higher quality and higher trust. Millennials, it's the opposite, right? They are foodies, they've grown up with the Food Network, but they love small right? They want to know the people that are behind their food. Where does it come from? So a good founder story is a great brand differentiator. And here you can see that even McDonald's is recognizing this truth now. I don't know if any of you read this article in Fortune magazine earlier in the year. If you didn't, get it, read it. And what they're talking about, again, is this big is now seen as bad, and all about the consumer backlash and this trend towards simplicity, right? They want to see that clean deck. They want to be able to understand and pronounce every ingredient that's in it, right? Is it something that I'd have in my own pantry? And, you know, even the big producers are starting to recognize this. ConAgra, a huge company, when they were at the big packaged goods conference in New York earlier in the year, they were quoted as saying, big has become bad. And indeed, if you look at the top 25 U.S. food and beverage manufacturers, in the last 5 years, they have lost $18 billion in market share, right? That is incredible. And it's like an iceberg melting. It starts gradually, but once it starts, it's really tough to stop. So there's huge opportunities, right? I think there's bigger opportunity now for those smaller brands to come in and capture market share from those big traditional companies that we've battled. But, you know, one thing we always say to our clients as they go internationally and as they also come back into Canada, you need to look across your plate, because even though brands and provenance is recognized, we also need to tweak taste profile. So I said, we don't, as a company, we don't get into taste, we don't actually get into product formulation, but we do help in terms of tweaking the consumer taste profile. So for example, we were working with a company actually from Holland on a snack product that they're just introducing into North America now. And we were working with their product development folks because, you know, Americans, they prefer their taste profiles a little on the sweet side. Canadians prefer it a little on the saltier side. But if you look at North America in a total, we have a much, we like our flavors much bigger than the more subtle European flavors. And if you go up and down the shopping aisles, you actually see that, right? We like those big blasted flavors. So we kept doing consumer research and going back to our friends in Holland and saying, no, you really do need to amp those flavors up for North America. And we finally got something that in consumer testing was working really, really well. But you also don't want to lose your point of difference, right? We also had somebody who came to us a little too late after the fact, and he'd gone through a whole bunch of product formulation. He had what I think would have been a product hit. It was a unique taste. It was a unique superfood fruit actually coming to North America from Africa, but it had been reformulated so much that it actually was now the 5th item on a very long ingredient list, where, you know, the people who'd been working on that taste profile had almost tried to, they had masked the whole reason for being there. So it's a fine balance. The great thing about Canada is because of the diversity we have in this country and in our cities, it's a real living laboratory. It's a great opportunity for food companies from elsewhere in the world to come here and test, because we have all sorts of different demographic segments represented here. So I think it's a great place to test before going to those global markets. And in fact, we've worked with a number of companies that want to appeal to the halal consumer, because we have quite a concentrated group of halal consumers within Toronto. It's a great place to test your product, get it right, and then you can go out and export to the Middle East. And of course, Canada is a great gateway to North America, right? Not just because of trade agreements, because of NAFTA, because of the great exchange with the dollar if you're exporting, but we know that if you're successful up here at Loblaw, that is respected with any retailer south of the border. Loblaw is now the 4th largest grocery chain in North America. So if you can make it there, you can literally make it anywhere. That's respected everywhere. So to leave you with one final thought before I open it up to questions, made matters, right? Made in, made by, made since. You want to make sure that if your brand has a strong provenance, you want to leverage it. If for a comeback brand, you want to rediscover your heritage, and for those new brands, you want to find that authentic story. So now I'll open it up to questions. Yes?
Right, I had also heard the same point that the large brands are losing the market share. But at the same time, you hear these stories of the large companies buying up the smaller niche manufacturers. We've had 2 examples just in the beer industry that we've heard over the past week. Do they think that they're now going to get the market share back despite everybody's going to know that it's not now going to be the same trusted product. It's just being taken over. And
Yeah.
it might actually be now mass produced and it's the same stuff you've rejected previously.
Yeah, absolutely. That's been going on for quite a while. And, it's growth that they're buying the small manufacturers because they need growth, right? And they don't have that top line, so they're doing it there. Do consumers discover it? Eventually, yes. Ben & Jerry's was a great example, right? That was a great, I would say that was a value-driven company, values-driven company, and then Unilever bought it. Didn't understand what they were doing with that product. Didn't understand that, a big part of that brand's DNA was giving back to causes, right? And Unilever actually kicked Ben & Jerry off the board that made the decisions about where the money was made. Consumers got so upset that they had to bring them back in, so they're trying to do some damage control there. But yeah, Kraft's buying up places, and Amy's just got bought up. And the great thing is, if you're a small manufacturer that's got something going, these guys are paying huge multiples versus what you normally would pay. But and then they try to bring it into their culture rather than trying to learn. What can they learn from small? But I've worked at these guys, P&G, Unilever. It's a machine. It's very hard to change that machine. But I think that it really is the best time. I've been in this business for close to 30 years. I think now is really the best time ever if you are small, wanting to expand, because that's what consumers really want. It's exciting.
Just have to declare that Joanne and I sat here, so she planted a question. No, it's not
now
true.
I'm really worried.
It's not true. It's not. Joanne, you talked about the decline in balance of trade in processed foods and so on, and I'm just wondering whether you think the main reason for that is the failure of marketing, or maybe it's tied somewhat to the difference in exchange rate.
Yeah, it's not an exchange rate issue. It is, I think it's interesting. I think it's part of Canadians' DNA, right? You talked about the Dutch, and I work with a number of Dutch companies, and it's sort of wired in their DNA. They come from centuries of traders, right? It's a small country, and they know they have to go out into the world. And, we look at our clients, and we shake our head the amount of time they're traveling, and they're actually in the air, circling the globe. But that's just, if you come from that country, that's the way you're built. As Canadians, we are far too comfortable, right? We don't think about, we don't have the same sort of entrepreneurial spirit. We don't think of ourselves as traders. We're very risk adverse. And I think that needs to start changing, right? We need to take some cues from our friends south of the border because they certainly get it. I also think, frankly, all levels of government and producers and processors, we need to get our act together, and we need to get this Brand Canada thing going. Because, you know, Ian, who's, you know, our head of new business, comes back just embarrassed, frankly, when he goes to and sees how Canada is represented on the world stage at other food and trade missions, right? It's embarrassing. You really do walk away thinking that all we sell is maple syrup, right? We don't need help selling that stuff. That stuff will sell itself. But as Brand Canada, we've got a great story. We've got great attributes. You know, the world really does need more Brand Canada. We just need to tell them in a way that's going to stick.
Do you think the reason why we can't do a Brand Canada is because we are such a large country with separate provinces?
Yeah, that's part of it. You have to make choices, right? And so somebody needs to herd the cats because, you know, Alberta's going to want to talk about the beef, right? And, you know, the East Coast is going to want to talk about the fish. But there's got to be a way that we can get an umbrella strategy. And that's why I showed Origin Green, right? Because they have all sorts of different, you know, people producing all sorts of different commodities, but they found a way to bring them together under one umbrella. And I think it can be done, right? We just need to have the appetite politically. We need to get enough processors and producers together. And the reason I brought up the Canada 150 in 2017, I think that provides, sometimes you need that burning platform to create that sense of urgency. And I think that could be it, right? There's government money. We know there's government money out there to celebrate. So what a great time to maybe use that as a point to pull it together and figure out what is Brand Canada and start talking about it out there.
It's half a 2-4. It's half a 2-4.
Half a two. Yeah.
I think you have already responded to my question. I just wanted to ask you, like, how can small and mid-sized companies look for like financing in their branding strategy? You know, because most of the mid-sized companies in Ontario, they seem to be focusing more on private label business, and which is again in the long term it's very risky, right?
Yeah.
So how can small and mid-sized companies go for like financing?
Well, that, you know, we certainly, we don't do that as a marketing agency. We work with other funders like MentorWorks and things like that. And I noticed when I was walking around at the tabletop, I think there was the company over there as well, so maybe they can talk about it, that helps with the grant writing. There is money out there, right? The government wants you to succeed, especially if you're in Ontario. There's all sorts of money through growing forward funds. So there's companies out there that will help you write those grants and get that money. Right there? There you go. You guys need to meet. Yeah.
Yes, I think you're right on the button there. You know, talking about one national thing. I know our companies run into this, and one of the big things is we spend a lot of time on verification, third-party auditing, all this sort of stuff that is it's actually very confusing of what goes on. Like, you know, if we had one standard, we do have the Canadian Food Inspection Agency. Unfortunately, they maybe don't have the help or the budget to do their job, and then all these other guys are running around trying to do their job, and then nobody knows who actually has any authority or liability. And it's very confusing to our buyers. It's very confusing to ourselves. It's very confusing to the producers and the processors, and it's an awful thing. So I think you're right on, and it'd really be good if you'd tell us how we could change that.
Yeah. Well, there is a new government, so I think there's a lot of hope. You know, that's maybe there's an appetite. I mean, I think everybody's starting to wake up to the fact that food is going to be the future of our economy in a big way, right? that this is what's driving the engine and is going to be driving the engine in the future. That's why, in the Ontario government, they're putting a lot of money towards it. And I suspect that the new Liberal government in Ottawa is going to also get that religion as well. So hopefully we can start, building that rallying cry together. Okay.
Okay, last one.
Joanne, you have a nice story. And I think everybody can be proud of Joanne. Branding of Canada, it's so easy. You told us the Netherlands has a gene about trade. But a lot of Dutch people are live now here in Canada. So I think with crossbreeds, you almost have 50% of our gene, more or less. But what we learn in the Netherlands is that you have to open your doors, windows, your barn, etc. We are using our royal couple many times also for our export. Because when our royal couple is visiting another country outside the EU, but also inside the EU, always a huge trade delegation is accompanied them. And our royal couple is opening the doors, because it's not only to get access to new markets, but also to maintain your market. There's also a nice example how you can brand or to promote a brand. Maybe you know our Heineken Huis. It's more or less famous all over the world. Who knows Heineken Huis? 1, 2, 3. Okay. Heineken House is fully private. Heineken is a beer in the Netherlands. When there is a World Championship football or European football, Olympic Games, etc., it doesn't matter where it is, there is always a Heineken House. Everybody who is visiting the Olympic city will also visit Heineken Huis. And there's free beer, they can talk. It's also about trade. That's a kind of mentality. First you have to invest, and then the revenues are coming. So I think if I may advise, now you have Trudeau, I think he's more open-minded and more trade-minded. And you have to combine that with the government, with the businessman, with Trudeau, to go out of Canada to show the world what Canada has. Because I think it's true, Canada has everything what we want. But we have to learn from that.
Yep. Fingers crossed.
Thank you, Joanne. That was inspirational, and I think we got the message as well. The rallying cry, Brand Canada 2017, do your part. And on behalf of the organizing committee, we would like to present you with the token of our appreciation.